Thank you, Gary. So I'm surprised to see that this is a new group, largely with a few exceptions. I was here in October, obviously a different stage of the flood recovery. So, I love your state. It's so beautiful, and I'm hoping for your sake that you won't see me for a while. It's been a rough last 5 years. I've been here quite a bit. I'm not complaining, but I think you guys deserve a break. So, my name is Amy Bach, and I'm a lawyer. I co-founded United Policyholders in the early 90s with somebody who had spent her career working for an insurance company, and she saw some dynamics in play that she did not like, where she felt that adjusters were rushing through and lowballing people in order to close the file, move on, close the file, move on, and she felt very pained that the insurance industry that she had devoted 22 years of her career to was taking what she felt was a turn in the wrong direction of not putting the policyholders' interests on a par with the insurance company's profit motives, but instead putting their profit motive ahead of their customers. I met her. I was a public policy sort of political person who had come up in the elected process, working in the legislature in New York and seeing how powerful the insurance lobby is, and thinking, we just need balance, because insurance is so important, as it turns out, right? It's so important when something bad happens, but it's not a subject that people think about or know about. The language is foreign. There's a lot of unfamiliar terminology, and in fact, what gets sold as a fuzzy blanket, that's going to be there and keep you warm, turns out to be actually a very hard-nosed business scenario where you've got a policy that's a contract and it's written by lawyers, and the adjusters are bound to read it very strictly, and there's all kinds of dynamics in place. Okay, so I thought, I think consumers need an organization like this to give them the straight scoop, no BS, no spin, no fluff, because so we're not selling insurance. But I think the insurance concept is great, right? Everybody's pooling their money. Hopefully you never need to pull out of the pool, but if you do, then the money will be there. I think I love it. It's a great system. So I actually like to see it work. But for the flood insurance is kind of a world unto its own. So what we're gonna do tonight, I'm gonna give you a brief review of what United Policyholders is about, what you can get from us. Everything we do is free, so we brought for you tonight, the handout that follows the slides. We brought a book, a little book. Right back there is our lovely, wonderful program coordinator, Emily Cabral. She's holding up a little flood claim handbook. If you didn't grab that, grab it. That is a very, very technical book that talks all about flood policies and how they're supposed to be read and how the claims are supposed to be handled. It was written by a couple of lawyers who have a lot of experience with flood claims in the southern part of the country, but the book is useful. How many of you, does anybody here have a Lloyd's of London flood policy? Couple, okay. So except for these folks, all of you, how many of you have flood insurance? Okay. So we will touch a little bit on if of those of you who did not have flood insurance but had a home insurance policy. Did any of you get any money from your home insurance for the flash flooding in September? No. Okay. All right. Well, we will briefly touch on that. What's that? Some people did, probably for sewer backup, some other things, depending on the damage to their homes. But what we're focusing on tonight is a flood insurance policy issued by the National Flood Insurance Program. Okay, United Policyholders, not-for-profit, no sales pitches. We've been doing this kind of work for a long time, trying to demystify the process for all of you so that you get every dollar that you're entitled to. That is our objective. You know, whether you get it by being a tough negotiator on your own, or whether you get it by going up the chain at the National Flood Insurance Program, or whether you hire a public adjuster or you hire a lawyer and you have to go into litigation, however you get to the place where you feel that you've gotten what you're entitled to, that's fine with us. We don't preach one path, okay? Whatever path works, great, okay? What we're here to give you is a menu of tools, resources, and guidance. And I have here with me a very special expert by the name of David Charles, who's standing right over there. After I do my bit, he's going to take over. And you're really fortunate because he's very rare. He's a very rare kind of life work experience and a very big heart. So he's here to share his technical experience adjusting flood claims on the insurer side for many, many years until he switched sides after Superstorm Sandy. And that's where I met him, because we are also working on Long Island and in New Jersey, helping people in the same vein. And by the way, Gary, who I think you all probably know how lucky you are to have him. He's one of my favorite public officials to work with. Very dedicated, very professional, and very on top of this complicated scenario that you find yourselves in, where you're looking, where's the money, where's the money, where's the money, where's the help? And Gary is pretty unique in that way to simplify things for you. He mentioned HUD. He mentioned the block grants, and those block grants have just started to come through in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. Sandy was in the fall of 2012, so it does take a while. I think yours it sounds like you're going to come faster, but when that money comes, it's very helpful. Okay, so and the last thing about the tax business, it turns out that not a lot of CPAs have experience with casualty losses, and so if you are doing your own taxes or you work with a CPA, I strongly encourage you to invite your CPA to come to the tax event next week, because it's free. And this CPA who's going to be presenting teaches CPAs all over the country this very, very tiny little niche of tax rules. How do you maximize the benefits that the tax code offers to somebody who's a casualty loss victim, and how do you avoid getting into a situation where like your insurance benefits get taxed or anything like that? So he's really savvy, and he specializes in teaching CPAs. So bring your CPA if you can. Okay, so we have 3 programs. We're here to give recovery guidance. We did a combo workshop in Manitou Springs last year, combo of recovery guidance for people there and preparedness guidance. But I think at this, is there anybody here who did not have a flood loss? Okay, so if you didn't have flood insurance and you're wondering whether you should buy it now, my guidance is always, if you can afford it, yes. And if you can look at Lloyd's, that may be a better option for some people, but the NFIP is certainly not going belly up. It's better than not having insurance. It may be more expensive than you think, or it might be cheaper. There's no way to know until you ask. And there is an agency in Denver, Flood Insurance Services, that's almost all they do is sell flood insurance. So get a quote if you don't have it, and let's move on. Okay, our website, uphelp.org. If you have questions that don't get answered today, we have something called the Ask an Expert Forum. It's confidential. You can email in your question, and we have experts from all over the country, lawyers, claim adjusters, contractors, public adjusters, and depending on the subject matter of your question, if it has to do with mortgage, can my lender take a cut of this check or what have you, we will assign it to one of our experts, and you can get a follow-up answer confidentially. Okay, these are 2 books. The flood insurance claim book I mentioned, our book, if you want that. It's a wonderful guide, largely on the you're not alone, where do I go next, I feel stuck. So if that was, most of it was written by people who've been there, done that, and are volunteers, including Karen Remus, who Gary has worked with in wildfire areas. Okay. We also have a flash drive if anybody is still struggling with an inventory. If you are wiped out and you're having to do an inventory of your contents, we have a couple tools to make that easier. If you're a computer person, we have a flash drive that's pre-loaded with a hugely detailed inventory, and then you can use that to do your contents list. Now, some of you who have flood, how many of you have flood insurance on your dwelling but no contents coverage? Okay. That came as a big shock to me when I started working in Sandy. I had no idea that there would be an agent that would actually sell somebody a flood policy on their dwelling without selling them contents, but lo and behold, it happens. But it shouldn't happen. I told you about this. Our library is, if you're having trouble sleeping, you can go there and. But I'm half joking, but we really have a lot of technical stuff. So if you really, if an adjuster or a contractor throws out a phrase to you, that is unfamiliar, chances are you enter it in our search box and something's going to come up about that phrase. Okay, so all kinds of stuff. What might be covered if you had a flood home policy but no flood? Maybe your temporary living expenses during the mandatory evacuation, but that's not a lot of time for most people, although it's an argument to be made, and policies have different language in them, so maybe you can make that argument. Damage from trees that fell on your house, wind-driven rain, did a window get broken, did the water come in to where you can't tell whether the water rose or fell or both or what. And in that scenario, you might have coverage under your home policy. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So you got to at least try to investigate the actual causation of at your house. Usually you need expert help to figure out what happened here. And this far from the actual event, of course, it's difficult. How many of you are still having trouble accessing your property? Okay, so for those of you who have really not had a chance to thoroughly inspect, you may have some arguments to get some coverage under your home policy, depending on what actually did go down. And there may still be evidence at the site. Okay, sewage backup due to electrical failure of a pump or other device, again, depending on your policy wording. Other damage due to power outages or surges. About the NFIP, we're here. There's really nothing that's going to change about it for all of you in the near future. It is what it is. It was created. A lot of people get confused between FEMA and the NFIP. So the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, is a partnership of public and private. So it's part government, part private insurance companies, okay? So the National Flood Insurance Program, the public part of it is part of the FEMA agency. So it's the NFIP reports to FEMA, FEMA reports to Homeland Security. That's the way it goes, right? But the NFIP is its own entity, but it is very, very closely related to FEMA, and it is technically part of FEMA. But people who work for FEMA work for FEMA. People who work for the NFIP work for the NFIP. Two different entities, okay? But close, but related. Now, most of you probably have a flood. How many of you have a flood insurance policy that has an insurance company name on it, like Allstate or, okay. So some NFIP policies are what are called direct, which means that the agency itself sells it. There's not what is called a WYO, write your own. If you have a policy that has an insurance company name, that's a WYO policy. It's still an NFIP policy. They all look the same. There's only 3 versions, I believe, but it's kind of like it's like a generic drug and a brand name drug. It's the same drug. It's kind of like that. Okay. So they have different rules. David's going to be going much more into that. You don't get ALE. Contents is an add-on, and it's actual cash value only. That's why depreciation is such a big deal for all of you, and David's going to be talking about that. How many people here feel that they were pretty surprised by how low the check was that they've gotten from their flood claim so far? Okay. All right. So there are limits and specific rules. Congress is over the NFIP. The ultimate boss of the NFIP is Congress. The people that have come and worked with you on your flood claims are independent adjusters, which is a misnomer. I can't hire an independent adjuster. Nobody here can hire an independent adjuster. Only an insurance company can hire them. It's kind of like, it's really like a temp thing, like an outsourcing. So insurance companies hire IAs, they're called. David will talk to you about that. He was one. And they travel from disaster to disaster. Some of them have a lot of experience and have been doing it for a long time and have a lot of knowledge about construction and materials and repair methods. Some of them have hardly any knowledge about those things and are talking off the top of their heads or somewhere else. But most of them mean well. Most of them are very much just wanting to do their job. They're not, most of them are not coming out there to try to cheat you or rip you off. They're just trying to do their job, and they, like a lot of other people, often have too much on their plate, not enough sleep. Maybe they're living in a hotel they're not familiar with the bed, they're not sleeping well, they're just wanting to move on. There are some financial incentives that are not helpful to get, that make IAs often miss things. I'll put it that, miss things, not do the math right. David's going to talk more about that. How do you avoid problems? Well, first of all, by getting educated. So it's great that you're all here. Stay organized, keep a diary. Even if you just scribble a few things in it every day, just so that you can track your progress, obstacles, and stay organized. Because I think a lot of you have found that it's pretty amazing, the state of mind you're in now compared to how you were before the flood. It's a very different reality, and it changes a lot, and keeping a diary is just super useful. Okay, I think we're gonna, I don't want to go too much into the details that David's going to go into about where you might be now, but because your proofs of loss on your flood claims you had to submit them in December. What we're talking about now for anybody who is here, has flood insurance, is putting in a supplemental claim. David's going to go much more into that. Is there anybody here though who has flood insurance but didn't put a claim in yet? Okay, good. That's good. All right. So our basic approach is to not only to get educated and stay organized, but to understand that you really have to advocate for yourself, and sometimes you're going to have to pay for help. And by that I mean somebody who's going to inspect and write a report for you on the physical damage. Because as much as you may feel like, why can't they take my word for it? It's my house. I live there. It smells bad, or this is not the way it was, or this room was not this way before, or all those things. Your subjective information only has so much value, and just the way insurance companies work is, where's the beef? They need to see the proof. They need to see the proof, and that's really hard for folks. When you're out of cash and you're not really looking to spend any cash that you don't need to spend, and you feel like somebody's already been out there and inspected, why do I have to pay somebody? Why won't the insurance company pay to get it re-inspected? The reality is it's your house. For most people, it's your biggest asset. So if the insurance company's not gonna pay to have it thoroughly, properly inspected, then unfortunately you're going to have to. And that may be one of those unmet needs issues that you can work on with Gary. You know, there may be some local experts that are willing, some structural engineers and some contractors that are ethical and experienced that may be willing to do some pro bono work. But if you can't find one of those, a lot of people end up getting stuck because they don't have the proof that they need. And David's going to talk to you a lot more about that. All right, so a lot of you had the adjuster do the proof for you, and you may just have signed it, and some of you may not even have that. So David's going to talk about how do you get a copy of the proof of loss. Does anybody here not have a copy of their proof of loss that was submitted? One person, two people, okay. You want to make sure you've got all your paperwork organized. Keep an eye on the timing of any denials, because one of the things that's most frustrating to me about the NFIP is how inflexible they are about deadlines and how strictly they enforce deadlines for proof and challenges and appeals and lawsuits, and how courts in litigation where people have sued the flood program and said, well, I didn't get what I was entitled to, courts tend to back up the program on their deadlines. So that's one thing, you know, with your homeowner's insurance, there's a lot more wiggle room. You know, I just discovered this damage, or, you know, maybe this letter from the adjuster isn't really a denial. It's much more cut and dried. Forgive the not very good pun with flood. Okay, so let's see. We're going to be talking about documenting your loss with David. These are some of the professional experts people need in a scenario like this. Soils, construction, mold, hazardous material abatement, board up cost estimating. For those of you whose flood insurance is not going to cover, even if you got every dollar, even if you got $250,000, still wouldn't cover your losses. You know, you're going to want to be tallying up everything anyway because of all these various potential pots of money you might be able to tap, whether it's an SBA loan or whether it's the block grant money or whether it's charitable or something from a religious institution. So, okay, the right experts are critical. Expert reports can go both ways. It's amazing how two people can look at a house and say, this is what needs to be done, and then the other guy will say, no, that's what needs to be done. And, you know, it can be very hard. But, you know, there are ways to come to a place of trust. And I'm going to let David talk a little bit more about that. So paying for inspections or reports to prove the extent and cause of the damage, to prove the value of the damage, to discredit biased experts. This guy has never seen, you know, every time an insurance adjuster brings this engineer out, he says, oh, that's pre-existing, that was pre-existing, that was pre-existing. That happens a lot. You know, what do you do when that happens? Okay, so at our website we have some sample letters. David's going to explain more about what a completed proof of loss looks like, why it's so important, and the fact that unlike home insurance, where some insurance companies will accept handwritten proofs, and they'll accept all kinds of different forms of proof, photographs, and the NFIP is very, very specific. You must use their forms. Okay. What are the most common problems with flood claims? Exclusions and limits in the policies, claim adjusting delays, delays in inspections and responses to communications. the adjuster using the visible water line saying we're not paying for anything above that no matter what, even if there's wicking damage. And then disputes over allegedly pre-existing damage. Okay, help is available. You really are not alone. A lot of what is happening here has already happened in Sandy. That's why I brought David out here. There are higher ups in the program. There are a lot of wonderful people working for the NFIP that are just a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of political pressure on the agency. There's pressure coming from homeowners. I think the agency is trying, but they serve a lot of masters. Our program is a source of help. Gary is a source of help. You've got experienced and ethical local public adjusters in this area. You've got case managers. You've got neighbors and friends. So options for resolving disputes. Go up the chain of command. Appeal, we're going to talk about that. Appraisal, we're going to talk about that. A lawsuit. I can talk about that at the end if people want that, or we can save that for another time. We don't have to cover everything tonight. We can come back. We have some support from the long-term flood recovery group and the Northern Colorado Community Foundation. We will be happy to come back. So don't feel like everything has to be covered tonight. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to hold your questions. I'm going to ask David some questions while he's presenting, and if we haven't gotten to your question, I promise we will stay until your question gets answered. Okay, we're not going to talk much tonight about this issue, but what about my agent or broker? What about this guy or gal who sold me flood insurance without contents coverage? What do I have a remedy? Well, you may, and we have information on our website about that. And the bottom line there is generally, okay, the law is generally that somebody who sells you insurance has to be honest. They cannot mislead you and give you misinformation. But they don't have a legal duty to come out to your house and say, oh, let me see, you should have, this is worth about $60,000, this is worth about $2,000, let me do the math. And they don't have that detailed a duty to specifically tell you how much insurance you should get, okay? But they cannot mislead you. And if you ask them a question, you say, do I need this kind of insurance? They must answer you honestly. If they say, nah, you don't need that, and you have proof that they discouraged you and told you you didn't need it, you might be able to collect from that agent or broker's errors and omissions insurance. So I'm not here to give you legal advice. We can't do that. But I will tell you that it comes down to proof. If you have proof that you were given incorrect information, then you might have a leg to stand on. Those of you who are here because you are interested in challenging a flood determination or a ruling that you have to elevate or something like that, that's a whole other subject that we would be happy to explore. But when we do that, I want to make sure we have somebody from FEMA here to talk about it. Is there anybody here from FEMA that's willing to raise your hand? Okay. But hey, overworked and underpaid and really trying hard. So, and I know it's very hard for people when somebody tells you, oh, you have to, elevate, or you have to spend this kind of money that you don't have. But, they are doing it, they feel, for your health and safety and for being practical. Okay, so I am going to wrap up. I think we talked about these things already. What is speaking up? We talk about that. S, strong as possible. P, politely assertive. You get more flies with honey. E, educated and empowered. A, asking questions. Here you are, ready. Keeping a claim diary. K, U, unwilling to be shortchanged. You paid good money for the protection, okay? And P, proactive. Again, here you are. So